As soon as my unfaithful wife flew to Europe to be with her lover, I set my plan into motion. I packed up her clothes, sent them to storage, emptied our bank accounts, burned every photo, and put the house up for sale. By the time she returned from her business trip, chaos awaited her. But things took an unexpected and darker turn when she and her lover were kidnapped at the airport, marking the beginning of my brutal revenge. They say betrayal can break a man, but for me, it sparked something far darker, a relentless drive for justice. Lucas Brunner was a man of principles. At 43, he held the prestigious position of Director of Operations for a luxury hospitality group in Vienna, overseeing a portfolio of high-end hotels across Europe. His wife, Marlene, was the jewel of his life, a striking, vivacious woman with the rare ability to make everyone in a room feel seen. Together, they were the envy of others, the perfect couple in everyone's eyes. But over the past year, Marlene had changed. Her laughter, once so vibrant, now sounded hollow. Her late-night business trips grew more frequent, her explanations less believable. Lucas tried to trust her, to believe her stories about important clients and networking events, but a gnawing unease began to settle in his chest. One evening, after Marlene returned from a client dinner, Lucas couldn't ignore the signs. Her cheeks were flushed, her dress slightly wrinkled, and there was the faintest scent of cologne, one that wasn't his. "How was your night?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. She smiled quickly. "Exhausting, but good. We might land a major deal." Lucas nodded, forcing himself to ignore the rising doubt, but deep down he knew the truth. The revelation came during one of Marlene's many business trips. Lucas, feeling both paranoid and desperate, hired a private investigator. Within days, the investigator presented him with damning evidence. Marlene wasn't meeting clients. She was with a man named Eric Fuchs, a wealthy Swiss entrepreneur known for his extravagant lifestyle and arrogance. Photos surfaced, showing the two of them at luxury resorts, sharing intimate moments. Lucas's heart sank as he scrolled through the images, each one shattering his trust further. The final blow came in the form of a recorded phone call, where Marlene's voice dripped with disdain. "Lucas is so predictable," she said. "I could tell him I was flying to the moon, and he believed me." Eric's voice followed. "Good. The less he knows, the better for us." That night, Lucas sat in his darkened study, trembling as he processed the betrayal. The love he had based his life on was gone, replaced by a deep, seething anger. "You've made a fool of me, Marlene, but you'll regret it. Both of you will." His revenge began the moment Marlene boarded a flight to Geneva to meet Eric. She told him it was another business trip, her usual excuse, but Lucas knew better. He spent the day methodically packing up her belongings. Designer dresses, shoes, jewelry, all carefully boxed and sent to a storage facility under his name. He left only a single suitcase, containing the bare necessities, a pointed message about what her life would be like without him. Next, Lucas closed their joint bank accounts, transferring the bulk of their savings to an account she couldn't access. He left her with just enough for a week, ensuring she wouldn't be stranded but also wouldn't be comfortable. To erase the past, Lucas burned every photo, every memento of their life together. He watched as the flames consumed them, the ashes scattering like the remnants of his trust. The final step was listing their house for sale. He contacted a real estate agent to ensure the property was shown while Marlene was away. By the time she returned, the house she had thought was her sanctuary would no longer be hers. But Lucas wasn't satisfied with merely dismantling Marlene's life. He wanted more. Eric would soon learn that there were consequences for his actions. Using his influence in the hospitality industry, Lucas began to quietly spread rumors about Eric's unethical business practices. He also managed to leak Eric's travel itinerary to a local journalist, knowing it would stir trouble for someone so obsessed with his image. But Lucas had darker plans in mind for their return. He hired a private security firm with questionable methods, ensuring that their arrival at Vienna's airport would be anything but smooth. When Marlene and Eric stepped off the plane, they weren't greeted with warmth but with chaos. Two men in dark suits intercepted them near baggage claim, their faces cold and emotionless. "Come with us," one of the men commanded, his voice low but authoritative. "What is this?" Eric demanded, his usual arrogance beginning to waver. The men didn't respond. Instead, they guided Marlene and Eric to an unmarked van parked outside. Eric tried to resist, but one of the men subtly revealed a firearm tucked under his jacket. Marlene's face drained of color as she realized they had no choice but to comply. The van drove them to a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of Vienna. Inside, they were separated and placed in stark, dimly lit rooms. From a hidden observation room, Lucas watched, his heart racing. This was the moment of reckoning. The interrogation began. The men, posing as investigators hired by an anonymous party, bombarded Eric with accusations of fraud and infidelity. Meanwhile, Marlene was shown photos of Eric with other women, fabricated but convincing, and was told that he had been using her as a pawn. "Do you see now?" Lucas thought as he watched her crumble. "Do you understand how it feels to be betrayed?" After hours of questioning, the men handed Marlene a sealed envelope. Inside was a single photograph of Lucas standing in front of a packed moving truck. Scrawled across the back of the photo were the words, "Welcome home." As Marlene stared at the photo, her hands shaking, one of the men leaned in close. "Your husband sends his regards." The room fell silent as the weight of Lucas's revenge began to settle in. The drive back from the warehouse to their former home was quiet. Marlene sat in the back of a taxi, clutching the photo Lucas had left for her. The house that once symbolized their love now felt like a hollow shell of memories. As the taxi turned onto their street, her worst fears were confirmed. A large for sale sign stood in the front yard, and moving trucks lined the driveway. Inside, the house was nearly empty. The walls were bare, the furniture gone. The only sound that filled the space was the echo of her heels on the hardwood floor. "Lucas?" she called, her voice trembling. In the dining room, she found a single envelope taped to the table. Inside was a brief note written in Lucas's familiar hand. "Everything you valued is gone, just like my trust in you." Marlene collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. She realized she had severely underestimated him. The full extent of his anger was only beginning to unfold. Meanwhile, Eric was scrambling to contain the damage Lucas had orchestrated. The leaked documents, planted rumors, and fabricated evidence of shady dealings had caused a crisis. Investors pulled out of his ventures, lawsuits piled up, and his carefully cultivated reputation as a savvy entrepreneur unraveled. Eric tried reaching out to Marlene, but she didn't answer his calls. She was too consumed by her own chaos to care about his downfall.
Days later, Eric received a package at his office. Inside was a USB drive containing surveillance footage from the airport warehouse. The video showed him being escorted into the van, his arrogance replaced by fear. The footage ended with the words, "This is just the beginning." Eric's hands shook as he watched the footage, realizing that Lucas's revenge was far from over. Realizing it wasn't just a string of bad luck, Lucas knew someone had been targeting him. A week after returning to Vienna, Marlene finally found him at his temporary apartment. He opened the door to find her standing there, disheveled, her usually pristine appearance now replaced by desperation. "Lucas," she began, her voice trembling, tears welling up in her eyes. "I was wrong. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. Please, let me come back." Lucas studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Fix this?" he repeated, his voice cold. "Marlene, you didn't just betray me. You humiliated me. You mocked me to your lover, called me predictable. Do you think I can forget that?" "I wasn't thinking clearly," she pleaded. "I was selfish, I know, but I still love you." Lucas stepped back, his tone icy. "If this is your idea of love, I want no part of it. You destroyed us, Marlene. You don't get to come back and pretend everything is fine." He handed her another envelope. "Inside are the divorce papers. Sign them, and you'll get enough to start over. But don't expect anything more. Marlene's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. You can't just throw me away like this, she said. Lucas's gaze hardened. You threw me away first. I'm just giving you what you wanted, a life without me. He closed the door, leaving her standing alone in the hallway, clutching the papers that sealed the end of their marriage. With Marlene out of his life and Eric's empire in ruins, Lucas felt a rare sense of relief. For the first time in months, he had taken back control, ensuring that those who betrayed him faced the consequences of their actions. One evening, Lucas attended a gala hosted by a rival hospitality group. While mingling with colleagues, he struck up a conversation with a woman named Clara, an event planner who had recently moved to Vienna. Her warmth and intelligence were a stark contrast to the coldness he had felt with Marlene. As the night went on, Lucas found himself laughing, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in far too long. Months later, Lucas received a brief but desperate email from Eric. You think you've won, but I know things about Marlene you don't. Meet me, and I'll tell you everything. Lucas hesitated but agreed to meet Eric at a public cafe. When Eric arrived, he looked like a shadow of the man he once was. Rumpled suit, confidence shattered. What do you want, Eric? Lucas asked, his tone calm. Eric leaned forward, lowering his voice. Marlene lied to you more than you know. She wasn't just cheating, she helped me get access to your company's client list. She thought she was being clever, but I was using her the whole time. Lucas's jaw tightened, but he stayed composed. Why tell me this now? Because I want to take her down too, Eric replied bitterly. She turned on me as soon as things went south. I have proof she embezzled money from your accounts to fund our trips. Lucas leaned back, his mind racing. While Eric's confession didn't change his plans, it validated his decision to cut Marlene completely out of his life. Armed with this new information, Lucas made sure Marlene's legal troubles continued to escalate. By the time he was finished, she was left with nothing but regret and the painful realization that she had betrayed the one person who truly cared for her. Meanwhile, Lucas embraced his fresh start. His career flourished, and his connection with Clara deepened. He had learned to trust again, but this time, with someone who truly valued him. One evening, as Lucas stood on the balcony of his new apartment, overlooking the city, he reflected on all that he had endured, the betrayal, the pain, and the revenge that had reshaped him. But through it all, they hadn't destroyed him. Betrayal doesn't define you, Lucas thought. It reveals who you truly are and who you're better off without. He raised a glass to the skyline, a faint smile on his lips. To freedom, to resilience, and to new beginnings.